Thank you for joining us today on Positively Charged Biz. We are here to motivate, inspire, and support our listeners as they write their life stories. We are a proud founding member of the Real Disrupt Podcast Collaborative, and you can check out more awesome podcasts at realdisrupt.com.
Hello, everyone. I hope you are having a positive and productive day. On today's show, we are going to learn why we need to have less ego and more soul, and how to reinvent ourselves in 21 days. I would like to introduce you all to Janet Ioli. She has been helping people and organizations make changes and maximize their impact for over 25 years. As a former leader inside 4 Fortune 200 companies, she understands firsthand the complexities and realities that leaders face leading their organizations. Janet partners with major universities as an industry expert in women's leadership. She is also on the faculty of American University's Key Executive Leadership Program for government leaders and is a designer and speaker for the University at Irvine's Women in Leadership Certificate Program. Janet is a contributor for Forbes and Thrive Global. She's the author of The Cure, Power Presence for Women, and Less Ego, More Soul. Janet, we are thrilled to have you today. And on Positively Charged Biz, we like to start at the beginning. So please tell us, what was that pivotal moment where you decided that you wanted to help women leadership and executive training?
Yeah. Interesting that you asked that because, my career has been working with men and women executives, right? So the entire time that I've been working with executives, I really wasn't focused on women, and nor did I start to say, oh, I just want to work with women. But what I started to notice, Laura, is as I would talk to these powerhouse executive women, I'm talking about incredibly successful, incredibly, anybody would look at these women and say, wow, look at this woman, look at what she's achieved. And she would project this image of confidence and poise and, just all these accomplishments. And as I would talk to them in the coaching, I would find a different story. And I wouldn't find this as much with men, the men I was working with. And the story would be this incredible need for validation, this incredible need to prove themselves, this incredible need to constantly hear that they're doing okay, to be recognized, and almost this thought pattern of, I'm not good enough, and no matter what they had achieved. And so that really not only perplexed me, but it also made me think, wow, we have a long way to go in women's leadership. And in terms of just the self-talk and the thought patterns that we have versus, what we're achieving and what we're doing.
Wow, that's fascinating. And
Yeah.
I can certainly 100% relate and agree with that. A lot of our listeners are successful women. And it's so interesting to me that, like you said, regardless of what they have achieved, and all of them have achieved many levels of greatness from personal to professional, and yet it's this constant, like you said, you need for validation, or, oh, there's someone that can do that better than me, or I'm not as good as, and always this comparison. Yeah. I find that fascinating because, like you said, that doesn't happen in the male brain. Like, that's not something that even comes into question, when they're in those situations. So,
and if it does, I'm not so sure they express it as much.
Well, that
so that's
probably on point. Right? Yes.
Right. Whereas, as at least, in my experience, I'll even tell you, there was one woman, and I think this was the pivotal moment where I said, wow, I really want to focus more on women, is a former executive client of mine called me up, and I hadn't been working with her. I had been working with her for about a year, and, she had gone on and moved on. And she called me up a year later and she said, oh, I've got to talk to you. And I said, well, what's up? You know, I'm so glad to hear from her, et cetera. And she said, well, I'm having a job interview and I'm getting they're offering me this position to work for the CEO of this large, it's a Fortune 200 company. And I said, well, that's great. Isn't that what you've been looking forward to? That's what you've been trying to do. She goes, yeah, but they really want me to be in that role. and I laughed because, yeah. But what she was really questioning was, why did they want her? That They must have been mistaken. There was something wrong, et cetera. So really, going back to that, everything we talk about, imposter syndrome and all of those things, I think it was much deeper than that. It was really a thought pattern of, wow, even if I get this, am I good enough for that?
Wow. And, in your book, you speak about the ego mask, right? Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So this book, Less Ego, More Soul, I tried to make it a little bit more generic to appeal to not only women leaders, but to women in general, because I think what we've been conditioned with is to don a mask, right? Over the years, as we get socialized and we grow up, we all learn different things and how to survive in the world. And one of the things we do is we learn how to please people. Yeah. Right. So, if I'm the good girl, I will do these things. If not, then I'm a bad person, right? I'm a bad girl. And so we learn in our ego exterior that pleasing is good. And that the rules, whatever rules people are telling us in our culture, in our society, in our family, that in order to be seen as good, I must follow those rules, whether I agree with them or not, right? And so that's one piece. Then, so that starts to become a mask. So we start to wear this mask of being this good girl, right? Then we also have to prove our worthiness as we go into school, as we start to climb the ladder or start getting a job, whatever it is that we're doing, even in our relationships. I'm going to prove how good I am. And, that comes through achievement. If I achieve more, I will prove that I am worthy, right? So there's this proving that starts to happen. And that's another layer of the mask. And for women, I think there's also this piece of polishing. If I look good, people will respond to me. I'm supposed to, there's that pretty girl. There's that, all of the messages. Yep. I mean, we could go into a whole show on that, right? But so those things start to become our identity, and they become our ego identity. And we associate ourselves with that outside image, which is really a mask. And not that that's not a good thing, because, right, even in psychology, even Carl Jung would say we all form that mask. Mm-hmm. But there's a point where if that is our only identity and that's what we identify with, it's not grounded.
Right. Well, and it also sounds like, okay, so now let's jump into self-evaluation, right? So, part of why we wear these masks, right, in life is that we have this image in our head, right? Okay, we're brought up young teenagers, early adults, now we're going through and we're emulating, we're taking a look at who's successful, why they're successful, right? And we're saying, okay, I'm going to kind of mold myself to fit whatever that is out there. And we're turning into this. And then I think you later in life, which I can speak for myself, the older I became, I started realizing, wait a minute, like, no, I'm not that, and you go through this self-evaluation, but I think that's a very difficult thing for most people to dive into and really get to the root of who you are. So what do you recommend in terms of having people kind of take off some of that mask and get to the inner core of who they are?
Right. And Laura, what a great point. I think what I've noticed, and one of the premises in the book, is where people avoid it, right? Yeah. So they avoid doing that self-reflection because
it's hard.
It's comfortable. And it's
uncomfortable,
right?
Yep.
If I start to think too much, then maybe I need to change something. or I need to dismantle something in my life that's working. Or I think it's working, right? Or else I've created it to work. And so I may have to redefine what success is. I may have to redefine things. And that's scary. I mean, I think it's scary for all of us. And what I found was that when I saw people doing that reevaluation, because I would be talking to clients, usually it would happen as a result of some kind of what I would call thunderbolt.
Right.
Something would happen, like they would lose their job, or someone in their family would die, or they would get an illness, or they would go
or there's a pandemic.
Right. Well, that's why I thought the timing of this, right? We're all kind of ripe for some self-evaluation of, what is success to me? But what I realized is that's when people would start to go a little bit more inward and start to do that reevaluation. But there didn't seem to be, and I'm not trying to make this simplistic, but there didn't seem to be a template. It's kind of, you get flooded with all this, who am I? What do I do? I'm not living in alignment. But how do I go about figuring it out? So in the book, what I tried to do is provide 3, what I call soul search sessions, where it's kind of like a template of, what are the steps I can take to start doing this type of reevaluation and not wait for this thunderbolt to hit me.
Right.
And to start really figuring out, what is most important to me. And so that's what I did in the book. And so those steps are first, the first step is really embracing who you are and who you've become so far. So it's not, my life sucks, up till now, and everything I've been doing. It's really, wow, look at this journey that I've been on. What are all the components of this journey, and how have they shaped who I am? Because everything I've done so far has taught me something. Yeah. Right. And in this whole thing, and every choice I've made, every person that's influenced me, whether I agree with it or not, has brought me to this moment. And so that's the first step. And so I have an exercise in the book that talks, it's a journey exercise where you can kind of just map that out in a drawing. The next step is to start to really tune into your inner voice. And the inner voice is something I think we tune out of a lot, because that's that little gnawing person that says, hey, something's off, something's out of alignment. And we ignore it a lot. I don't know about you, but I know I've ignored it a lot. And a lot of the people I work with have told me that, right? That it's annoying because it's causing you to make a change. It's like, okay, so how do you discern what that voice is and really start to listen and talk to it? And not it be your ego voice, but be a voice of somebody inside of you that's really more part of your soul, right?
Yeah.
And I know we don't like to use that word that much. So you can call it whatever you want, but there's some voice inside you that's connected to something greater. Right. And whatever that is.
And exactly what you just said. Some people call it their intuition or their gut instinct or whatever word is comfortable to them. I totally agree that it's very interesting how I like to call them like the barriers. The barriers come up and kind of give you the warning signs. Like the warning signs start happening, but first they're small and you're kind of like, that was weird. And then they get bigger. Then it's like a bigger barrier comes. Right. Then it's like, are you going to ignore that one too? And then like literally like a brick wall is now coming. And you're right. It's uncomfortable. Most people just keep, shooing it away and not listening, but there is a guide. There absolutely is a guide that will show you those barriers will no longer be there if you make this change or this adjustment or you listen to this. So wholeheartedly agree. And what do you think, I mentioned the pandemic being, one of those monumental things. Everyone has had to make changes, adjustments, adapting to change. What do you think what do you think the side effects of this? And I don't necessarily mean negative. I think there's actually some very good things we have learned from this experience. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm a naturally optimistic person, so I like to see the good in people. I'm been a little dismayed at how when we're under stress or we're under threat, Also, the worst of us comes out, right? But with that, I also think the best of us comes out. And it really is a choice. And I really think is that I'm hoping that something like a pandemic will be a thunderbolt that will really cause us to shake ourselves and become more conscious.
Right.
Because what you're talking about, what I was talking about earlier is living unconsciously versus consciously. And I think this pandemic has caused us to take a step back because we have all this time now, because usually we're so busy in the doing, achieving, our kids going to school, having to do all of these things that we're doing. Now we have space. And when we have space, we can do a self-evaluation of not only what am I doing, but who am I being while I'm doing these things? And I think that's the pivotal and the key question here. Do I like who I'm being? Do I like who we're all being? And that's a deep question, Laura.
As you're saying it, I'm
Right.
literally thinking to myself, that is a very deep question.
Right.
It really is. And I guess you have to be honest with that answer, right? Because
Right.
sometimes we kind of placate and say, breeze through it. But if you truly look at that and make that answer, that could be life-changing.
Yeah.
It really is. And, I'm with you. I'm naturally optimistic that I try to look at the good in everything. And I've heard so many people say, wow, I didn't realize how much I lost that connection with my family. And now this has given me the opportunity to have the kids at home, or to have those dinners that we used to order out, or we used to go out, and now we're together at the dining room table, or, I was speaking to a gentleman last week that his kids, he had 6 kids ranging from 16 to 5. Yes. And he was speaking about how, homeschooling, the whole thing.
Yeah.
The family got together and built a Corona coaster in their backyard.
Oh my God.
No joke. They had PVC pipes that they melted they watched the video on YouTube. That was how they came up with the idea. But the family came together, and I said to him, do you know what kind of memories you just made?
Exactly.
That's going to last generations, because your kids are going to tell their kids. And that is going to be something that will be remembered long after, because they were started telling me he was disappointed he couldn't take his kids to Disney World because of the pandemic. And I said, listen, I love Disney. I'm a big Disney fan too. But that Corona coaster
is going to be much better than Disney. Yeah, I'm with you. Oh, absolutely. Are you kidding?
Yes.
Plus they were involved in making
the whole family together. The whole family together. So that's where you have hope, right? That's where you realize that is a pivotal moment that probably changed the direction that family is going to go in one way or another. That's one of those moments, and it's wonderful. So tell me about this 21 days. What are we doing in these 21 days? What path are we on?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, how I think people need some sort of a template.
Yep.
And I'm not one who likes to oversimplify things, because I think sometimes, it's 10 tips for this and 5 tips for this, and we way oversimplify things. But I do think because I work with so many people and we've done so much self-evaluation, that people are looking for some sort of a template. If I am going to do some deep self-reflection, how do I go about doing it? And so I said, all right, what is really the process that you go through? And I started to talk about it earlier in your last question, is I feel like there's really 3 steps in the book, and 1 step a week. So 21 days, 1 week, 1 week is 1 step. The second step is the second week, where you can actually give a gift to yourself to do some, not wait for this thunderbolt, even though we've gotten one with a pandemic, but really give yourself a gift of reclaiming a piece of yourself that may have been dormant or silent.
Okay.
And that's that inner wisdom that we all have. And to start living more in alignment with that voice versus all the voices that you've kind of created for yourself.
Absolutely.
The 3 steps were, the first one was to embrace yourself, right? So during the first week, I have that exercise where people write out their journey. They actually make a picture. You're going to draw your journey. And there's a bunch of self-reflection exercises to evaluate, where am I now and what have I learned so far, right? So where's my current state in a business environment, right? The second step is, all right, so now I've had all this noise. I've had all this conditioning. How do I go inside of myself and really try to find that real voice? Not just the voices of all the people that are telling me what I should be doing, what success looks like, because you said it earlier, we look around and that's what success is. Well, what's success to me? So in the second step and second week, you really learn to listen to that voice. And I have 3 exercises that you walk through with questions that help you listen and really find that grounding of your own. And then the third step, which is the third week, right, is what I call create your personal manifesto.
Okay.
And what I do is I ask people to take all the information from the first 2 weeks and create a document. I mean, an actual manifesto that you're going to live by. And remember I said doing versus being. This manifesto is who am I and who am I being? And there are 3 parts to it. It's who am I? What do I believe? And what am I committed to? Now, those sound like really simple questions.
It's
but
not.
when I'm talking, they're not simple questions at all, right? And so by the time you get to that third week, you're really ready to really think big and answer those questions. And when I say who am I, it's not like, oh, I'm Laura or I'm Janet.
Yeah.
It's who am I at the core and what am I here to do and serve? So that you can start to align your actions going forward with who you really are at the core and not what just other people are telling you. And then you're also making a commitment. What am I committed to? So every time you're off track, you look at this manifesto and say, wait a minute, I said I'm committed to this and I believe this. Is that how I'm acting? So it allows you to become more conscious, really. So it doesn't mean, Laura, you go tomorrow and you quit your job and you go start a llama farm, right? You could stay right where you are and make these changes in just the way you think and also the way you behave.
I love that. I think that's a great way to break it down. It definitely is. And I think, I'm thinking in my head, you have to do the work. There is no magic wand that comes out that says, okay, if you sit for the next 30 minutes, you're going to figure out your entire path and your entire life will come up with rainbows and unicorns and sunshine because you're going to figure out the rest of your life. Not at all. And you have to remember, listen, especially with women, we have different seasons. We absolutely have different seasons in our life that, yes, when you're a young mom with little kids in the house, that you're during that season, maybe things are going to be on a different path than maybe when your kids are a little older. Maybe the kids are now in, high school, or maybe it's time to send them off to college. And now it's like, okay, here we go. We're going to focus. Now we're going on this path. So we certainly understand this is not an end all be all. Okay, if you write this when you're 28, this is it. Your whole rest of your life is mapped out. No. Things change. Well, the seasons in our lives change, but it's actually very important that we reevaluate this and actually that's a question for you. How often should you? Because I do believe that, especially as women, we do go through these different cycles in our lives. So what would you recommend, or when is a good time, or when should you look to say, okay, that was great, I did that, so many years ago, but I'm finding myself feeling out of alignment, right?
Yeah.
So
No, and I couldn't agree with you more, Laura, about the seasons and what's important at one phase in our lives. I mean, the whole theories of adult development show us, right? What's important at one phase is not necessarily as important in another phase, and it goes on and on, right?
Yeah.
However, what I am trying to convey in this book is that, and I would think most women would agree with this, at least the way I've tested it, and you tell me what you think about this, is there's a core a deep core inside of you that probably hasn't changed much.
I think that's true.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a person. It's this deep, deep, deep inner wisdom. Now, of course, you know, what I did when I was 20 versus what I did when I was 40 is very different,
of course.
Right? But again, that's doing.
Yep.
Right? Who I am at the core, this kind of inner compass, is probably pretty stable.
Yep.
I mean, think about the things that brought you joy when you were a kid, right? Think about the things that you were really good at when you were a kid. Mm-hmm. Are you still good at those things?
Oh, yeah. I actually, it's funny because my husband and I met when I was in high school.
Oh,
and
wow.
we've been together for 30 years. This year we celebrate our 30th anniversary. And I actually say to him, it's so interesting. I don't feel I'm any different of a person from when we met in high school versus all these years later. So to answer your question, no, I mean, you do have that core. Now, sure, the seasons have changed, right, and different things have happened, but the core is still the core.
And that's what I'm talking about finding in this book.
Got it.
The core, so that it becomes a compass. So no matter what it is you're doing, everything you're doing, all the noise around you can change. Your focus can change. All of the things can change, but that you're grounded with, what do I stand for?
Yeah.
And what do I stand for shouldn't change that much.
Nope.
You know what I mean? And what am I committed to? And what am I here to do is in service of the world, you know, from a bigger perspective. Now we're getting really deep, right? Is probably very similar. And so reevaluating the tactics of those things may be, you know, every year you take a look at what your goals are, all of those things. But these aren't necessarily goals. They're more guiding principles.
Right. I like that. And I think that's very good that we clarified that.
Yeah.
Because I think you're right. I think once again, it's something that especially women don't necessarily take the time because, again, the doing, we're very good at doing. We're very good at multitasking. We're very good
pleasing, at improving, and polishing.
Taking care of everything. Yeah. Like you said, we're polishing, we're pleasing. We are great at all of those things. Yeah. What we may not be great at is identifying that core. And I would believe that when you know that, it only makes you shine even more in many ways because it's like that epiphany, right? Now it's clear. It's clear. All of us.
Laura, what it does, I really believe this. I mean, I'm saying this from, you know, the bottom of my heart, is that it grounds you. Mm-hmm. And when you're grounded, all of the noise around you and all those daily dramas that are so like rattle you so much start to not be as important because you're very, very clear in the core of yourself.
Right.
Because the pleasing and the proving and the polishing, it's kind of what I said earlier when I said, why did I want to work with women? Remember what I said to you? It's this constant need for validation, this constant need to prove. Well, when you're grounded in what you believe in, who you are, and what you're committed to, that need starts to subside.
Right.
And you become a lot more, I don't want to say nonchalant, but you know who you are. Right. And so you don't need that external validation as much.
You know, it's funny. I told you I work with a lot of women that it's a personal responsibility that I'm trying to lift them up. Right. And the question I get all the time is, well, how did you get to be confident? Right. And like as if it's just something you go to the, you know, you pull it off the shelf and you have confidence.
Yeah. Right. 5 tips and you apply them.
How to be confident.
Right.
So, but what you're speaking about is that when you truly have that grounding and that core and you know deep down who you are and your mission of what you're serving to the world.
That's it.
You can't help but exhume, you know, it will just come out of you.
It's a presence.
Yes, it's a presence.
And it's a very powerful presence.
Yes.
Because you're drawing on something, and that's where the transcension goes from ego and less ego, more soul.
There you go.
That's really what it is, right? You're drawing on something deeper and greater than yourself.
Right. I love that. Very deep. That is very deep, Janet.
It is deep.
That is.
That's the question. Do we want to go deep?
Yeah.
I think we're ready.
I think we're ready too. And I think especially after 2020, I think it caused many, many, many people to go deep, whether they wanted to or not.
Right.
They were faced with situations where they had an awful lot of time to think, and everything was lifted to where it was uncomfortable, and they had to really evaluate. And I think it showed us something that it was the perfect time, and that's why this is great that your book came out this year, right? It came out in 2020?
Actually, just the end of July.
Wow. So Brandy, the perfect time.
I actually finished it during the pandemic because, I had done these soul search sessions with people just in a workshop. And as we got into the pandemic, I thought it was such an irony that we were wearing masks, right? Because that's the premise, right? We wear masks anyway.
We do.
And I thought, I really want to write this down and finish it because I think it's a timely time for people to have some sort of a template to be able to do some self-reflection. But it's work. I think what you said is right. It's not a book where you just go read it.
No.
If you want to just go read you want to sit on the beach and lie down with your feet back and, let me just be entertained. That's not going to happen. It needs you to sit down and really think.
Yes. And it's well worth it. It is certainly well worth it. That is for sure. Wow. Okay. So you also speak about journaling. I know that you strongly believe in that.
Yes.
So share your thoughts on that.
Well, in the book, I talk about journaling as a way to access that voice. Mm-hmm. And by journaling, what I mean is really writing. What happens is, we have our conscious and our unconscious mind. And we're not very attuned to what's going on in our unconscious. We're very, what's in our face right this moment. And there's so much creativity. I believe everybody is incredibly creative, resourceful, and whole already. And a lot of that, it rests in our unconscious mind, but we don't have the time. We never make the space to tap into it. When you journal, and again, what's so funny is people say, well, what's the right way to journal?
Right.
How do you journal, right?
We're trying to please. So we want to go the right way.
There it is, right? Please improve. I'm doing it right. I'm the good girl.
Validation.
And there is no right or wrong way to journal. It's writing down what's coming up and allowing yourself a space to just be and write. And even if you're writing, I don't know what to write for a few sentences, tapping into, what are some thoughts that are streaming through my head? And as you get in the habit of doing that, you start to see, wow, there's some things that I'm thinking that I'm not even conscious of or aware of. And you start to notice patterns. So I really think journaling is powerful. If you make, again, just like everything else, it's a habit. I mean, if you're like me and you buy this fancy journal, right? For many years, I used to buy these fancy journals. I'd write one page in it and then that would be the end of it, right? But if you make it a habit, I think it's a great gateway into your unconscious and your creativity.
I agree. And then to take it a next step after journaling, visualization. So I know you also speak about visualization. So
So in the coaching training that I went through when I became certified as a coach, I went through this one incredible visualization exercise. I had been looking at visualization exercises for years, but there was one that, and you may have heard of it, Laura, it's pretty commonplace, but I think if done in this context, it's incredibly powerful. It's a visualization of your future self. Mm-hmm. And really what it is, it's a way to tap into your inner wise woman. So it's that place that we're talking about, right? So that we all have that inner wise woman that resides in us, but how do we tap into it? And so I give the instructions in the book of how to do this visualization to actually speak to your inner wise woman 10 years in the future and have the person give you, and really it's yourself, right? Give you advice on what you should be doing currently. And it's pretty powerful. Everybody that I've talked to who's been through this and myself included, have found it to be like a life-changing exercise. But you have to be open to it, because, if you start to think, oh, this is some woo-woo thing, and visualization or any of those sorts of things, you can convince yourself that it's not going to work. But if you just release and surrender and open yourself to trying something like this, you would be amazed at what you find inside yourself.
I always challenge people when they get concerned about, oh, it's not going to work, this is the way you want to look at it. What's the worst thing that happens? It does. Like, is that the negative? Is
Right.
The negative that if you're trying to visualize yourself of where you see your life being 5 years, 10 years in the future, and of course you're visualizing positive things, you're looking at what you want to see. So what's the fear? That life that you want is actually going to happen?
Right.
Like, is that the worst thing that happens? So
Right.
if anything, if you go into it being open-minded and having that visual in your mind, what is the worst thing? You get that life?
Right. Or you find a part of yourself that you didn't even know was there.
That's right.
Because it's really your inner voice that you're talking to.
That's right. Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
Janet, this has been deep.
Yeah.
Really.
Good word. Word for the day, right?
Word
Well, it's
for the
time to go deep, right? I really
Yes.
think it's time.
I think it is the perfect time to go deep and do the work. And for all the ladies out there, don't be afraid to be uncomfortable, because it absolutely is well worth it. And it's amazing of what you have inside of you and the gifts and what you can share with the world. We all need more of your gifts. So don't be afraid. All right, Janet, how can people get the book? How can they follow you? How can they see everything that you're doing?
Yeah, so the book is available on Amazon. So Less Ego, More Soul. That's the latest book. So that's the book we talked about today. JanetIoli.com is my website. So that's Power Presence Academy, where it's all the things we talked about, confidence and all of those sorts of things for women in leadership. And then I'm on LinkedIn, is actually where my biggest presence is. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I write lots of little articles every week. I also do some video series and power talks and things like that. You can find those. And then, I have a small presence on Instagram. That's at Janet Ioli.
Awesome. Well, this has been wonderful. I truly appreciate this was a great discussion, and for everything that you're doing. I read the book and I am doing the work, and I'm a big journaler and all that good stuff. So thank you so much. We wish you all the best in everything to come. Take care.
Laura, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Take care.
All right.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Positively Charged Biz. I'm Laura Brandeo, and we are here to motivate, inspire, and support our listeners as they write their life stories. If you have an inspiring story, please email me at laura@positivelycharged.biz. And remember to subscribe to hear more great guests. And connect to us on Facebook at Positively Charged and Instagram at Positively Charged Podcast. Until next time, we wish you a positive day.